Verses like that can make it difficult to recruit new Christians. But the truth is that John 3:16 and Luke 9:23 have to go together in order to understand the gospel's invitation to follow Jesus. You see, John 3:16 emphasizes believing, and Luke 9:23 focuses on following. These two things necessarily have to go together. There's no believing without following. There's no John 3:16 without Luke 9:23. You see, in Luke 9:23, Jesus clearly lays out his expectations for his followers. This verse defines the relationship Jesus wants to have with us. It spells it out on his terms so that we can know exactly what we're agreeing to when we decide to follow Jesus. Jesus begins his call to follow him with two words, if anyone. Anyone is a significant word because it makes clear that whom Jesus is inviting. He is inviting anyone. Anyone is an all-inclusive word. His invitation is addressed to anyone. Many people don't realize that they've been invited to follow Jesus. They think, not after what I've done. Jesus wouldn't want me to follow him. I wouldn't make the cut. After all, what's the point in auditioning for the part or trying out for the team if you know you don't have a shot? But the beauty of Jesus' invitation is it is for anyone, an open invitation. The invitation of Jesus to follow him begins with if anyone. And it turns out it actually means anyone. Anyone means me, and anyone means you. The next part of Jesus' invitation to follow him in Luke chapter 9 will make sense to followers, but it will sound completely crazy to fans. Jesus defines the relationship he wants to have with us and makes it clear what it means to be a follower. He says, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. The phrase I want to draw your attention to here is come after. It's a phrase that is commonly used in the context of a romantic relationship. Jesus says, come after me. He's describing a passionate pursuit of someone you love. So the best way to understand what Jesus is wanting from his followers is to compare how we pursue him to how we would pursue someone we would like to have a romantic relationship with. I know this might sound a little crazy, but most of us have done some illogical or irrational things in a passionate pursuit of someone we love. It's a pursuit that can easily consume our thoughts, our resources, and our energy. I remember when Felicia and I first began dating in college. I did some pretty illogical and irrational things to show her how I felt about her. I surprised her at her place of employment just because I was in the neighborhood when she worked 30 minutes from campus, right? I would wake up at 6 a.m. to give her a kiss before she went to work when I didn't have gospel class until 9, you know. And once we got engaged, I attended all the CCU home volleyball games with a sign that said, proud future husband of number 10. Yeah, I did. She liked it. Looking back, some of these things, they seem really silly, but it shows that I was passionately pursuing Felicia since the beginning of our relationship. And what's so crazy is Jesus wants us to pursue him the very same way. He wants us to passionately pursue him. That's what Jesus is looking for from a follower when he says, come after me. Jesus wants us to come after him. He wants us to passionately pursue him. The craziest come after me story, though, is when God put on flesh and came to this earth and died in our place. He took the initiative to pursue us. When we realize the extravagance of his love, it begins to change our hearts. We love him because he first loved us. So Jesus' open invitation to follow him begins with an invitation for anyone to follow him passionately. But a fan will try to accept the invitation of Christ, sometimes to follow, but they don't really want to say no to themselves. But in Luke 9:23, Jesus makes it clear that if we're going to follow him, a casual, no-strings-attached relationship isn't possible. He says, if anyone were to come after me, he must deny himself. You can't come after Jesus without denying yourself. The phrase deny himself isn't the idea of simply saying no to yourself or even resisting yourself. The idea here is that you don't even acknowledge or recognize your own existence. To deny yourself is to totally surrender everything to Jesus. You see, followers are willing to deny themselves and say, I choose Jesus. I choose Jesus over my family. I choose Jesus over money. I choose Jesus over my gaming system. I choose Jesus over shopping. I am completely his. I choose Jesus over the person I'm dating. I choose Jesus over my freedom. A follower makes a decision every day to deny himself and to choose Jesus, even if it costs everything. When we sacrificially deny ourselves for Christ's sake, it is the clearest evidence of our committed love to him. For many Christians, the concept of denying themselves was not a part of the deal. They grew up with a message that such a radical decision really wasn't necessary. So they signed up to follow Jesus, but denying themselves was a part of the explanation. It was in the fine print. You see, that's especially true of American Christians. In part, this is due to the collision of Christianity with American capitalism. It has created a consumer mentality in our churches. Instead of approaching our faith and saying, out of the spirit of denial, saying, what can I do for Jesus? We often, as followers, we come and we say, with a consumer mentality, we say, what can Jesus do for me? But if we want to be followers of Jesus and not just fans of Jesus, we must deny ourselves totally and surrender everything over to him. Jesus' open invitation to follow him passionately, surrendering everything. That's the invitation he has for us. The final piece of Jesus' invitation is to take up your cross daily and accept an everyday death. What would you identify as the slogan or symbol for followers of Christ? I would say Jesus lays it out pretty clearly in Luke 9:23 when he extends the invitation to follow him. He says, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. The slogan for followers of Christ could accurately be captured in 3 words. Come and die. Well, at least it gets your attention, right? Not really the kind of slogan that draws people in. It sounds like a horror flick released around Halloween. It's not a slogan people flock to. It's a slogan people flee from. You see, nobody wants to talk about death. It's so final, so complete. But as Bonhoeffer put it, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. And the symbol for followers of Christ isn't any better. It is a cross, an instrument of torture and death. We've tried to make the most of it, right? We've turned it into ornaments, into necklaces, into jewelry. But those hearing these words of Jesus in Luke chapter 9, the invitation to take up your cross would have been both offensive and repulsive. For Jews, the cross was the means of execution that the Romans used to enforce their will, to put them into submission. The cross was a symbol of humiliation, suffering, and death. You see, my friends, Jesus didn't come to this earth so that you could be better behaved, or tweak your personality, or smooth out your rough edges. Jesus didn't even come to this earth to change you. The truth of the gospel is that Jesus came so that you could die. So that you could die to yourself and live for him. Jesus invites you to take up your cross. But that's often where we leave his invitation. But the next word makes all the difference. The word is daily. Take up your cross daily. Every day we must make the decision to die to ourselves and live for Christ. Dying to ourselves is not a one-time decision. That's the most challenging part of dying. So you might ask yourself, what does it look like to die every day? Well, dying today, it could mean that you sit with somebody at lunch who doesn't have anybody to sit with. Or maybe you take your vacation, you change your plans, and you go on a mission trip instead. Or maybe you grab some friends and you go down to Wheeler Mission downtown and you serve. Dying to yourself, maybe it means forgiving that person who wronged you, that person who hasn't even asked for forgiveness and doesn't even really deserve it. Or maybe dying to yourself means that you simply love the unlovable. You see, the hardest part about carrying your cross is it's so daily. It's every day. Each morning, by the grace of Jesus, we are invited to take up our crosses and die. That's the only way we will follow him that very same day. Every morning, we must crawl back on the altar and die to ourselves. That's the invitation that Jesus has for us in Luke 9:23. But let's look what he says in the very next verse. He says, "For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it." It's only by dying to ourselves that we truly find life. When we finally let go of our lives, we surrender our lives to Christ, that's when we will find true life. So that's the beautiful, challenging invitation that Jesus has for you this morning. Jesus has his arms open wide. He's anxious for you to be a part of his family. But let us not forget, Jesus is not looking for more fans. He's looking for followers. As we come to our time of invitation this morning, I pray that you would realize that this challenge that Jesus has for us this morning, this challenge to come and die, it's a challenge to come and live. Because the only way that we'll truly live in this life is if we die to ourselves and we live for him. Because this world is pretty empty when we live for ourselves. But if you're looking for a life that is full of joy, you're looking for a life with Christ. Let's sing.